Hi, and welcome to the 12th video in our C# for Beginners tutorial series. In the last few videos, we went over some conditional statements. Today, we will start looking at the different type of loops we can do in C#. So there's a total of 3 different loops that you can really do in C#. You're not limited to those 3, but those are going to be the 3 most commonly used. So those are the for loops, the do while loops, and the do loops. So we're going to be taking a look at the for loops today. So they kind of work very similarly to the for loops in PowerShell. As you've probably kind of noticed, there's a lot of crossover between C# and PowerShell. So let's actually go ahead and let's get started. So to start the for loop, you're going to start with the keyword for, and then an open and close parentheses. And then in here, you're going to initialize a counter first for your variable. So here we're going to do an int. I usually use the counter variable I, and we're going to initialize that to 0. And then you're going to put a semicolon, and now you're going to put in the condition for the loop. So we're going to do as long as I is less than or equal to 10. So as long as the I is less than or equal to 10, it will stay in the loop. And then we're going to do another semicolon. And then here's where you will either increment or decrement your counter value. So here we're going to do I++ because we're going to increment it by 1 every time that we go. You could also do I plus equals 1. That will also increment it by 1, but we're just going to do I++. And then we're going to do an open and close curly bracket. And then in here, what we're going to do, we're going to do console.writeLine, and we're just going to output our variable I. So if we actually run this here, we should see it pop up very shortly. So here it is. So as you can see, we started off at 0. So here's our 0 value here. And then what we told it is we told it to stay in the loop for as long as I is less than or equal to 10. And then we do an increment by I every time that we iterate through it. So we have 0, and then we increment by 1, so then we have 1, increment by 1, again, all the way to 10. And then we notice that it's equal to 10. So we do the last increment, and after that, it is stopped. So that is perfect. So now if we accidentally did a mistake here, and we said as long as it is I is greater than or equal to 10, we will see that if we run this here, we actually get nothing because I is never greater than 10. So it actually never executes. So it kind of goes in here. It sees that the I is value is 0. Is I greater or equal to 10? No, then we don't even go into the loop. So that is just something to be wary of, is make sure that you can actually go into the loop if that is something that you want to execute. So we could actually do the exact same thing as a decrement. So we can actually set I is equal to 10. And then as long as I is greater or equal to 10, I is greater than or equal to 0, what we can do is we can do an I minus minus, and that will decrement our value. And then if we actually run this here, we will see that we actually go from 10 to 0. Now, what if we didn't want 0 and we only wanted it to stop at 1? Of course, we could just do this, or we could actually keep the 0 and just remove the equal sign. And we will see that we stop at 1. And this is because once the loop goes through, we're going to do I is 10. I is greater than 0. So we decrement by 1. And once I is equal to 1, we go. I is greater than 0. Yes. Decrement by 1. So now I is 0. Check the condition. It is not greater than 0. So it exits out and never writes the 1. Never writes the 0. Now, we've only seen decrements and increments by 1, but you can actually do increments and decrements by values greater than 1. So let's actually do a value here. We're going to count all the way to 50. And what we're going to do is we're going to increment our I by 5. So here we're going to do I equals 0 is less than 50 or equal to 50. Add 5. So it's going to go 0, 5, 10, 15, 20. Here we are. So here we can actually see we get 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, all the way to 50. So let's say if we wanted, so there's actually two ways to do this next question that I have. But let's say we wanted to take a look at getting all the even numbers from 0 to 50. There would be two ways. Now we can actually increment by 1 and then put an if statement in here and say if the, so actually we can just do this here. So we can say if I is modulo 2 equals 0, then we go ahead and write the console write line. So if we actually do this here, we will see that we only get the even number. So we get 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, all the way to 50 in increments of 2. Now, the way that this works is we have our loop, we're incrementing by 1 every time, and then we are checking if I divided by 2 and the leftover of that, the leftover of I divided by 2 is equal to 0, then we know that it's divisible by 2, because 4 divided by 2 is 2, and there's no leftovers. But 5 divided by 2 is going to give 2.5. So it's really 2 whole values, and then you're going to have a 1 left over. So we only want where there is no leftovers. That's why this works. But now another way to do this would actually be to just do an I plus equals 2 here. And then we wouldn't even need that if statement. So now if we just do this, we will get all the even numbers from 0 to 50 just by simply changing our counter. So there are a lot of different possibilities that you can do with for loops. We're going to see once we actually get into arrays, we can actually loop through entire arrays with the for loop because we can reference the index by using our counter variable, and then we can just make sure that our counter variable is less than the length of the array. But we're going to be seeing that a little bit later on when we actually take a look at arrays. I wanted to cover loops first, and then we're going to be covering arrays immediately after this, just so we can combine all of our learnings that we've done so far. So that is pretty much it for loops. They are definitely very, very handy for doing iterative loops if you know how many increments you want to do, or have someone tell the program how many times you want it to run. It is very, very handy. The next one that we're going to be looking at is going to be the do while loop. So of course you can imagine that is also based on a different constraint. So we will actually see that on the next video. If you guys have any comments or questions about this video, or have questions about other programming topics, please leave them down in the comments below, and I will do my best to get back to you as fast as possible. And if I think that the question actually can give some benefit to a vast majority of people, I will be doing a video on it. If not, if it's a little bit more specific, I'll just answer you directly. Also, if you if you like this video, make sure to actually subscribe and hit that like button, and also hit that notification bell to be notified when those next videos come out for the do while and do loops. And I will see you guys on the next video.